Hello, my lovelies, and welcome to what is now the House Beyond the Hedge. You know, new hair, new name. So as this is a bit of a get to know me video, which I probably should have done way back when I started my channel, but here we are. I decided to do this video now since I am changing the name of my channel and my Instagram, which is where my original channel name came from. And I thought I would just explain a little bit about why I'm doing that, why it was what it was before, and then we will get into the real meat of the video, which is going to be my life in books, otherwise known as 10 books to get to know me. So let's start with the channel name change. Way back in, I want to say 2006 maybe, I started a blog back when that was a pretty big thing that people were starting to do, and it was called Buccaneers and Ball Gowns. I decided on that name because I have always had a lot of interests that are very widely varied, and historically none of them really go together super well. So I chose that name because not only did it represent things that I love, pirates and adventure on the one side, and then fancy lady drinking tea kind of thing on the other side, but also it sort of represented having conflicting sides of aesthetics or interests or all sorts of things that don't really go that well together. So I've had that name for a really long time, and it means a lot to me. I mean, you know, you get attached to things and feel sentimental, and so it was kind of a hard choice to decide to change it. But while I feel like that still represents me and that I still have things that I like that are sort of total opposites, which you'll kind of see in today's video, I'm sort of trying to, I don't know, synthesize all my interests in a way that can group them all together as much as possible. So this channel now is really about a lot of the interests that kind of go together and trying to make those work together. And then also I recently moved to a new, well, not a new town, my hometown, and a new house. And our house has this really cute little hedge out in front. And I just spent a lot of time thinking about names and what I would want if I was going to change the name of my channel. That's a pretty big deal to me, and especially my Instagram. So I just really spent a lot of time thinking about what I wanted it to be, and I sort of brainstormed a lot of ideas that had more specifically to do with tea or books or interests that I have that you'll see on this channel. However, I felt like that was confining it too much to those specific things, whereas I really want still my channel to be flexible in what I talk about and what I do videos about. And while tea and books and that kind of thing is kind of one of the major things, you're still gonna see random videos about other stuff that are just things that I'm interested in and love. So I really wanted something that was more all-encompassing, and I don't know, the House Beyond the Hedge just came to me and it just felt right. You know, I just feel like it really represents this stage of my life. Also, it seems like it kind of has a little bit of a mysterious edge, kind of a witchy vibe, which is also one of my interests. So yeah, I'm really happy with it. I hope you all like it. And I am going to be changing my channel name and my Instagram name, and I'll probably start a TikTok, so we'll see how that goes. Getting in there with the youths. So that's just a little bit about the channel name change, where I'm coming from, where I am now in my life. But I want to get into what the main part of the video is about, which is the books that represent me. And I had already kind of had an idea to do a like my life in books video. I was going to do choosing a book that sort of represented each stage of my life. Where was I at in elementary school, middle school, etc. But then I saw this trend going around, which you've probably seen if you're not a cave troll, or at least if you're not a cave troll that doesn't have internet. Some cave trolls might have really good internet, I don't know. You've probably seen this trend going around of 10 blank to get to know me. And there's all sorts of ones, 10 fictional characters, 10 movies. I'm sure 10 books is one of them. So yeah, I decided to do 10 books to get to know me and have that be sort of the framework for this video instead. We're gonna start from the beginning of my life and come through to my life now. So yeah, let's start with number 1. The first book to get to know me is The Seashore Noisy Book. And this is by Margaret Wise Brown, pictures by Leonard Weisgard. As you can see, this book used to be a library book. I have no idea where we got it, how we ended up with it. But it was literally my favorite book when I was a really little kid. I don't remember a lot from when I was a small child because I have a bad memory, but I remember my mom reading me this book. So it's about a little dog named Muffin, and he goes to the seashore, and it's sort of all about the noises that he hears at the shore. It has really pretty illustrations with this sort of teal and orange color scheme, which is really cool. It asks these questions, which this is the really awesome part. When I was a kid, I loved this. It was like, what's the noise that he heard? And then it has a question like, was it a walrus blowing through his whiskers? And then down here it says, no. So every time there was a question, which we'd read this a million times, so I knew, my mom would be like, was it a walrus blowing through his whiskers? And me, as like 4 years old or whatever, would be like, no. I won't spoil for you what the actual noise was because, you know, you better go look at it. But I mean, it's just, look at that. It's so cute. So yeah, this was just a really formative book for me as a little kid. And so that is why it is my number one. It was my favorite little kid story when I was a child. All right, number 2. So, number 2, also when I was a kid, probably read lots of fairy tales. I'm sure that's a thing that a lot of children read. But I had this book, which is called Peralts Fairy Tales with 34-page illustrations by Gustave Doré. And this was actually given to my mom by my uncle, but then it just ended up at our house, so I read it a lot. And the reason that I love this and why I included it, because I think it gives you an idea of who I am, is these are not the modernized happy endings of fairy tales. These are the fairy tales how a lot of them originally ended, which is like, if you know anything about fairy tales, most of them are pretty dark. And these stories are definitely like that. And they all have this, I don't know if you can see that, but they all have a moral at the end. So the bad thing happens and then you like learn a lesson from it. But let me tell you about my favorite story in here when I was a kid, which was Bluebeard. If you know the story of Bluebeard, then you know where this is going. Also, look at those illustrations. I mean, those are gorgeous. So yeah, this story is real dark. Basically, if you don't know the story of Bluebeard, he has this wife and he's like, you can go anywhere in the castle, but don't go into this one room. Like, you're not allowed in there. So of course, being a human being, she's like, screw that, I'm gonna check out this room. And she goes in there. I'm gonna spoil it for you because I think it's important that you know what kind of person I am. She's like, screw that, I'm gonna go in there. So she goes in there and it's like all of his previous wives who he's murdered. And I think he cuts off their heads. It's been a while since I've read it. Yeah, so it's real dark. In the end, I think this one actually works out okay. When he realizes that she's done this, he's going to cut off her head too. I think it's like all the previous wives also looked in the room. But then her relatives or something come and stop him, I think. So it turns out all right in the end. But the overall story is like very morbid and dark. And that gives you the kind of idea of like what kind of child I was and still am. I love creepy things, kind of morbid things. When I was a little kid, actually all growing up, we lived on 20 acres and I would go out and find bones on our property and collect them. And I had a bone collection. I mean, I still had, you know, a sticker collection and an eraser collection and all the collections you have when you're a little kid. But I also had a bone collection, so you know, that's just the kind of girl I am. Let me read you the moral of this one. Ladies, you should never pry. You'll repent it by and by. 'Tis the silliest of sins. Trouble in a trice begins. There are surely more's the woe. Lots of things you need not know. Come forswear it now and here. Joy so brief that cost so dear. But then, and that was kind of like, you know, women, stay in your place. But then there's a second moral. Another moral that says, you can tell this tale is old by the very way it's told. Those were days of daring do. Man was lord and master too. Then the husband ruled as king. Now it's quite a different thing. Be his beard what hue it may, Madam has a word to say. So I like how they were like, listen, here's the original moral of the story, which is like, ladies, don't look in that closet, you know what I mean? But now, even when this was published, which was probably like in the 70s or something, they were like, we got feminism now, you know what I mean? So we're gonna just add this extra moral so that women don't actually think that they should just do whatever their husbands tell them. This is a really great book and I recommend it. And I think that that is very telling of who I am as a person. That I loved the story about the closet with all the wives and their heads cut off in it. So that brings us to number 3. So number 3 is a little bit of cheating because this is actually 4 books. If you watch my previous video, you will know that I'm a big Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit fan. Well, and these are coming next after the children's books because when I was growing up, my mom would read these books to me, like before I went to bed, and probably started with The Hobbit because that one's a little more for children, I guess. So probably started with that, but then we moved on to Lord of the Rings. If, like I said, if you watch my previous video, you'll know that I have a special editions of these books that belong to my mom. I don't have those with me right now, but you can watch that video if you want to see those. They're like from the 70s. And those are the ones that she would read to me. And so those are really special to me. And yeah, it just was very formative in my life. If you watch that video, you know that I love all things Middle Earth, including the movies, the books, everything. So it started me down a path of reading probably ahead of, you know, what the reading level for my grade or what was or whatever, because she read me those books when I was a little kid before I could even really read them myself. But then as soon as I got a little older, I would start to help with the reading of them. I loved the adventure, everything about it. My mom would like do different voices for different characters, which was amazing. So thanks, Mom. These just really, I think, were one of the big influences on me getting really into reading and books, and then branching off into reading just on my own, you know, young adult novels and things of that nature. So I won't go over that too much more. If you want to hear me talk more about these books, you can watch my previous video, but just suffice to say that they are very important to me, and definitely if you want to know who I am as a person, Lord of the Rings factors into that majorly. So I know that was a little bit of a cheat because that's 4 books, but I think they kind of all count as one thing in this. All right, number 4. Also a little bit of a cheat, but hey, this is my video. I can do whatever I want. So I actually don't have a physical copy of the book with me for number 4 because they're, I think, in my parents' house in storage. I need to get them out now that we've moved back here. But number 4 is the Redwall series. That was probably one of the first major book series that I read on my own, not like my mom reading it to me at bedtime. And I loved those books so much. I started reading them pretty early on, and then as he would write new ones, I would read them until maybe I got into like high school or something, and then I got distracted by other books that we'll talk about. But seriously, I love those books so much. And I actually have been wanting to reread the first one, so I need to dig it out just because it's been a really long time since I have. Even though they were such a big part of my life, like huge part of my life, it's now been quite a long time since I've read any of them. So I would really like to try rereading at least the first couple. And so I'll put up a picture of what the first one looks like here. It's just called Redwall, and then there's a ton of them in that series. And yeah, it's just something about, you know, the main characters are all animals, and it's like adventure and kind of has like a Britishy feel. And yeah, I just loved it. Recently, when I was looking up maybe rebuying some of them, I found that they re-released the first, I think, 4 or 5 with more modern covers, like different editions for, I guess, what they think the kids of today want. But I will also put the image up here. It's bad. You see a lot of covers like that in maybe the last 10 years for like young adults kind of novels and things, but no. For Redwall, no. Whoever made that decision, just no. It was a bad idea. Because as you saw, what the original covers of those books look like kind of has this medieval, soft, illuminated manuscript feeling, which totally fits the books. And then these new covers is just like, what are you doing? Anyway, that's a little bit of a rant. But I'm guessing that if you read those books when you were a kid, and now that I've shown you these covers, you also are probably like, what the F? Because come on. So yeah, Redwall, number 4, very, very important to my life. That was where I really, really got into reading on my own. They're not tiny reads. I mean, they're fairly substantial books for kids. And yeah, that really continued me on my journey of getting into reading, and I just loved reading those so much, and that really, I think, helped me become who I am as a reader. So that leads us into number 5, which, once again, I'm just clumping a lot of books into one number here, but let's talk about Agatha Christie because that's my girl. When I was probably middle school, maybe, I don't know how I read my first Agatha Christie book, but once I did, I checked out every Agatha Christie book they had at the library. I went to the library a lot. We didn't really buy a lot of books. I did buy, I think, pretty much all of the Redwall series, but otherwise I pretty much just went to the library and checked out a ton of books and read a ton of books from the library. So my library had this huge collection of Agatha Christie books. It was like all a hardbound collection, like they all look the same. So I've read a lot of Agatha Christie books. I won't say I've read all of the Agatha Christie books because I don't really remember which ones they had for sure and which ones they didn't, but I've probably read a majority of them. So yeah, I just really discovered a love of Agatha Christie. I discovered a love of mysteries, which I think that was the first time I'd really read a lot of mysteries in my life, and I kind of just picked a random one for my collection to represent this, but I did pick this because it is Death on the Nile and Other Hercule Poirot Mysteries, and oddly enough, based on my interest now, Miss Marple seems like she should be my main jam because she's just like drinking tea and eating scones and solving mysteries from her little English garden. Which, let's face it, all of that definitely is my jam. For some reason, when I was a kid, Poirot was definitely my favorite. I read all of the books that I could get my hands on, but the Poirot ones were always my preferred mysteries when he was the detective. So that's why I chose this one to represent it, even though I'm kind of just lumping all the Agatha Christie books into one for this. So yeah, that's pretty much all I need to say. I feel like it's Agatha Christie, so you know that she's rad, and I probably don't need to extrapolate on that anymore, except that it was definitely a big step in my reading journey, I guess, was discovering Agatha Christie and mysteries and reading all of those from the library. So, I'm honestly not really sure where to put this in the order because I don't actually remember the first time I read it, but I want to say it was like in middle school. This book, which is Jimmy Buffett's autobiography. So now we're getting into interests that I have that don't really go with all of my other interests. One of the things I love is Jimmy Buffett. I have loved him and his music since I was a kid. My parents used to always play his music, and I guess I just never went through that phase where you rebel against the things your parents like. I just always have loved Jimmy Buffett. But the Jimmy Buffett tropical vibe lifestyle doesn't really go with pretty much any of my other interests except, like, I guess pirates, kind of. So that I actually have a whole separate YouTube channel, and I did a podcast for a while, which I'm taking a break from, Jimmy Buffett related, so you won't really see much of that on this channel for the most part. But I had to include this book in this collection of books to get to know me because this book had a really big influence on me. As you can see, I have a lot of pages marked that I marked probably the first time I read this when I was in middle school or whenever. And he has also written a number of novels, like fiction, but this is his autobiography, and it's just so good. You probably wouldn't think this if you don't know a lot about Jimmy Buffett because you probably only have heard of like Margaritaville, but he's actually a really good writer. He has a really deep catalog of music, and he also is a really good writer of books. So his books are really good and well written. And this book, even though it's not fiction, is still pure escapism. Like, it's just him talking about all the stories and adventures that have happened in his life. And this came out in like the 90s, so he could probably write a whole second autobiography at this point because he's like 74 years old now. So like I said, I won't get too much into this side of my interests, but if you really want to know who I am as a person, go read this book. You won't be sorry. I mean, you might be sorry if you hate fun and the tropics and adventure, but if you like those things, then you definitely won't be sorry. Even if you don't think you're a big Jimmy Buffett fan, this might change your mind. Okay, so that brings us to number 6, which is the only thing in my life, there's been like 2 things in my life that I've been ahead of the game on. Usually something gets popular and then I find out about it or decide I like it 3 years later after it's already stopped being popular. But one of the few things that I have been ahead of the game on in my life was, wait for it, Game of Thrones, y'all. This book, which you can probably tell has been read quite a number of times, it's not in the best condition, is actually an advanced reading copy. And I got it because my mom's friend used to work at a university bookstore, and they would let her take home advanced reading copies that they got for books, but, you know, weren't going to put out in the bookstore. And so then she would then sometimes pass them on to my mom. So this was just in our bookshelf. I probably read it, I want to say, beginning of high school. And I was like, hey, Mom, have you read this? Like, should I read it? And she was like, sure, go for it. So I read this book, and oh my God, I was so into it. And then I continued to read the others as they came out, and I just loved it so much. And this advanced reading copy, like a few years ago, realized that it might be worth something, and I looked it up, and it is definitely worth several $100s probably. Obviously, I don't use it to like read anymore because I'm trying to keep it in at least as good of condition as it is now. But yeah, if I had known that advanced reading copies might be worth something, I probably wouldn't have read it as much as I did. And it's funny because there's like typos and stuff in it because it's, you know, not the final fully edited edition. So yeah, that's kind of cool. I like having this. I'm not gonna like try and sell it or anything, but I'm also gonna try, you know, not make it worse. But yeah, so I read this in high school, read all the other ones as they came out. In college, I literally didn't know anybody else who had read these books except one, Mike, shout out to you, who also loved these books. And we really bonded over that because, like I said, I didn't know anyone else. I didn't have anyone else to talk to them about, but I loved them so much and I was so excited. And then you know what happened? They made it into a show and it became super popular, which, let me tell you, I am not one of those people that is really protective of things that they liked before other people. Some people get really, I don't know, wrapped up in that being part of makes them who they are, which this book definitely, and the series, once again, we're including the whole series now, definitely makes me who I am, was a big part of my reading experience growing up. But I am not one of those people that's like, I liked it before it was cool and you're all stealing the thing I like. I'm more like, hot damn, other people like this thing now, and actually have someone that I can talk to about the thing that I love. So I was really excited when it became really popular and the show became really popular. I mean, I'm sure some people went back and read the books after liking the show, but the show is still like the thing that's very widely popular versus the books. I still love the books. They're a very important part of me and who I am and what I have read in my life. So that is why I'm including them in this video. That brings us to number 8, our good friend, Jane Austen. You knew she had to be in this list somewhere. Specifically, this is Pride and Prejudice because, while I've read the other Jane Austen books, it's been a while for most of them. Pride and Prejudice is my favorite. I know that's probably pretty basic because Pride and Prejudice is like most people's favorite. I don't know if that's true, but I just feel like I hear people say it's their favorite a lot. That and Emma, I guess. It's also been a while since I've reread all of them, so maybe I would feel differently now that I'm older or something. But this has been the one that's really been, I don't know, important in my life, and I've reread it a bunch of times. It's just a comfort book for me. It's very representative of one of the parts of my personality, which is loving old-timey things and Britishy things and the era where you just like sip tea in your parlor. Because if I didn't have to have a job, you can bet your buttons that I would be just sitting in my parlor drinking tea every day, because that sounds rad. Yeah, definitely a piece of my personality right here. If you want to know what it's like to be me, just read all these books and then let me know what you thought. Next up, we have number 9, Crocodile on the Sandbank by Elizabeth Peters. And actually the whole Amelia Peabody series, which this is the first book of that series, literally is my favorite book series to date. Love Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit. Love Song of Ice and Fire. This is still my number 1 favorite series. If you want to know who I am, read some of these books. These books are about a lady named Amelia Peabody, Victorian era, and she wants to become an Egyptologist. So the first book is her first sort of foray into Egyptology, and she meets this other Egyptologist who is a man, and of course they don't get along at all, which of course means that they are meant to be together. So there's romance. It's a mystery. Every book is a murder mystery. Every time they go to Egypt for the season, there's some kind of murder, and then Amelia ends up solving it. And she is just a firecracker of a lady, feminist before her time, actually right around the time of women's rights and things. Marches to the beat of her own drum. She is independently wealthy and a little bit older for a single woman in those times. And she just doesn't really think that she's ever going to meet a man that can keep up with her or want to get married. But then she meets Emerson, who is the Egyptologist. It's just great. It's one of those, I don't know, hate to love type romances, but it's also very buttoned up and British. So there's not a lot of like sexy things happening, like really none of that at all, but it is just a really cute romance. After they get together, I mean, I don't think this is really a spoiler because the first book they meet in and then the whole series is like they're together. After they get together, they have this kid, Ramses, who is just the most precocious child. And if you have seen the Mummy movies, specifically the first two, I'm pretty sure whoever wrote those or someone on that project has read these books because there is a lot of similarities. I won't go a ton into it, but if you read these books and watch those movies, you'll know. And one of them is that their kid that they have in the second movie is so similar to Ramses, just super precocious, knows a ton about Egyptology. I mean, there is something happening. Like, these people have read these books. So anyway, the books are just a delight. I cannot stress to you how much of a delight these books are. They are fun. They are mysterious. There's always this murder mystery. They're hilarious, like laugh out loud funny to me anyway. And also really accurate Egyptology. So the author, Elizabeth Peters, which is a pseudonym. She actually has several different ones for different book series that she has written. She also was an Egyptologist in real life. So all of the Egypt stuff, all the Egyptology, all the history is very accurate, which I think most people that write books that aren't specializing in the field that they're writing about try to do research and make it accurate, but this is like an Egyptologist wrote these books. So in addition to just the books, something to know about me is that I have always really been into ancient Egypt and Egyptology. So it's really no wonder that when I read this book for the first time, I was like, this is it. This is it. So yeah, I could really go on at length about these books, but just please, if you have any interest in murder mysteries, fun adventure, Egyptology, just read the first book and maybe the second book because I think that gives a little bit more of a feel of how the rest of the series is because the first one is kind of setting up everything. And let me know what you think because this is another series that I do not know anyone except for my mom that has read these and I don't have anyone to talk to them about and talk about how much I love them. And if anybody wants to do a book club, I'll reread them. I mean, I reread these like every couple of years at least. So yeah, if you ever read these books, please let me know if you enjoyed them because they are literally my favorite book series and I cannot stress enough how much I love them and clearly very important on this list for me and representative of who I am. All right, we have made it to number 10, Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts by Kate Raculia. Sorry, Kate, if I'm mispronouncing your name. And this book is really good. It's kind of a mystery adventure sort of. Honestly, don't even know how to describe this book. I'm just going to read you the flat description because I think it's going to be kind of hard for me to describe this book in like a few short sentences. Tuesday Mooney, name of the character, is a loner. She keeps to herself, begrudgingly socializes, and spends much of her time watching old Twin Peaks and X-Files DVDs. But when Vincent Price, Boston's most eccentric billionaire, dies, leaving behind an epic treasure hunt through the city with clues inspired by his hero, Edgar Allan Poe, Tuesday's real-life adventure begins. So basically, it's like this mystery that she has to solve, is joined by friends and people she meets along the way. It's just a really fun, kind of spooky, interesting, well-written book. It says, Tuesday Mooney Talks to Ghosts is the perfect read for thrill seekers, wanderers, word lovers, and anyone looking for an escape to the extraordinary. So besides the fact that I just really loved this book, part of the reason I picked it is because the character, Tuesday Mooney, is a prospect researcher, which is the job that I do. And I'm not going to get into trying to explain it because I work for a university essentially, but if you want to know more about it, you can read this book. book and get a good idea of what that job is like. I kind of did a big jump in time, but I wanted to pick something that was really representative of me now, currently in my life. Obviously, all of these books are still important to me and have had a big impact on who I am and how I've grown up. But this one is very representative of me right now, especially because she literally does this job that I do, which is not a lot of people even know it exists. So that's why I picked that one. So yeah, that is all 10 books to get to know me. I hope that you enjoyed going on this little history lesson of me. I had fun picking out which ones I thought would be, obviously there's a lot more that I could have included, but when you have to narrow it down to 10, you know, I had fun picking out which ones I thought would be best. I hope you didn't mind sticking with me. I know this is kind of a long video, but I really appreciate you being here as always. And I would love to hear what your 10 books to get to know you would be. So if you want to leave those down in the comments, I'm interested to see if I have any overlapping ones with anyone, or really just to hear what everyone else lists are. So please put that in the comments if you think you have 10 books that like represent who you are as a person. If you want to follow me on Instagram, you can now do that at House Beyond the Hedge, which is my new Instagram account. And I will also throw my Twitter, and I stream on Twitch sometimes, and I'm gonna have a TikTok down below as well, so you can follow me at all the places if you want. But yeah, I think that is it for this video. So always remember to keep the kettle warm, because I will see you next time.